Good morning, everybody, and I hope you're all well today, this morning. Welcome to Thinking on Sunday. We're living in new times now. This is a new world after the referendum result. Well, this morning we've got Reggie Adams, our new speaker this morning. He will seek to navigate a new thinking and a new way of understanding the political world for us as humanists. I think he's quite a background, and it certainly astounded me with some of the things that he's done, just talking to him now. He lived quite an extraordinary life. So I think I'll just read, perhaps I should just read what was on the handout. Reggie Adams is a very 21st century political philosopher, a blogger, campaigner and author. His book, Now Utopia, sets out a vision for a better future based on what he believes to be the emerging ideology of our time, political humanism. His work has become the basis for the Humanist Party's manifesto and is co-designer of MagnaSocia, an online platform for direct democracy. Former nightclub owner, this is what turned business consultant. He's an established playwright as well as an artist and a musician, so he's got quite a profound background to his life. So let's welcome Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. And of course, thank you to Evan in his absence for reading the book in the first place and putting me in front of you here today. And thank you all for coming. So this is the book in question, Now Utopia, that I've come to talk about. This is the book in question that I've come to talk about, Now Utopia. I'm not here as a book salesman as such. I'm happy to give away the e-version, at least, of this book. If you sign up to me, put your email down, I'll ping over the e-version in whichever format you like. Because what I'm looking for more than anything is peer review of the ideas of this book. So I put myself in front of you for that reason. I know what an intelligent group of people you are. I've been here several times before. I've campaigned with some of you, as I recognise. I know how intelligent you are. I also know how critical you can be sometimes. But of course, I mean that in an endearing way, and I look forward to your questions and answers at the end. Because this is a book about how we may change our future, how we make, it's a positive outlook of how we make the world a better place. So, of course, that's an easy platitude to make, isn't it? Because I'm guessing we all of us here can say that. We all want to make the world a better place, don't we? And we all want to see progress in the society we live in, I'm guessing, yes? And we want to solve those world problems. And that right there, what we've just engaged in, is a starting point for me. Because we just come together on some, very superficial ideas, but we came together as a room full of people, as a collective, and engaged on some objectives, some societal objectives. And essentially that's all I'm writing about, is what can we agree on? What is that starting point? And I suggest that's a completely different juxtaposition to the way we do politics and the systems of doing politics that we've got in place at the moment. So I hope to convince you of that point during this course of this 50 minutes. It's a place that starts with, essentially what the people want. And that's what I'll be showing. And I call it a name. I call it Political Humanism. That's the title, that's the flag I'm planting and suggesting that this could be a very beneficial ideological centre for how we move ahead here in the 21st century. So let me just start by suggesting why we need a new ideological centre to rally around. I suggest that the way we do politics at the moment, the way we're fixated, is not fit for purpose in the 21st century. And I think, with recent times, we're all realising that. Of course, the alternative is that we pull it down. And none of us want that either, I don't think. We want to make some sort of progress, some sort of evolution on the way we do politics. We're fixated on this antiquated tradition for how we carry out the most important things, aspects of our society. This tradition that hasn't changed in hundreds of years, and it's not about to change itself. Some people are benefiting from this system. It's not a broken system, a failing system. It's built this way. And it's built, I suggest, as an agreement between those who take power and authority and those who are in business making profit from that authority. And it's born out of its history. It's born out of that history. And the legislation that's come about over the last few hundred years has only empowered some of these global organizations like the World Bank, like the International Monetary Fund, like the World Trade Organization, the Bank of International Settlements, organizations that represent the interests of private equity. And then let's never forget that. They are no authorities on how the world should run. It's people that represent in private equity, making profit out of everything we do in life. There's an ideology. The only game in town is the ideology of deregulated capitalism. And all our political parties are sucked into it. What's called the Overton window exists of the New Labour, everyone that's talking the language of deregulated capitalism, a certain type of capitalism we have in place. And there is an economic model of the growth of GDP. That's the economic model, the only game in town. Growth of GDP, constant growth, exponential growth on a finite planet. And I suggest, how has this project gone during my lifetime? And I'm guessing perhaps there's one or two of you, I'm guessing that may be slightly older than me. During our lifetime, what's happened in the world? There's, the changes, the leaps and bounds and progress we've made in this internet generation. Like how we do business, how we socialize, how we communicate, is making leaps and bounds. But the system we have in place is more of a system for really maintaining the status quo. The project that we can say as this over the last 40 years of data has shown that the wealth divide is only getting more elongated. It's only getting worse. And there was a figure, wasn't there, when that Occupy thing was coming out and everyone was talking about this 1%. 2010, there was a figure that came out that said the 1% of the wealthiest people own the equivalent of the 50% of poorest people. And of course, Oxfam has revised that this year, and they say that 62 billionaires on the planet, the wealthiest 62 people, own the equivalent now of the world's poorest 50%. A 50% that's grown by 400 million in those 6 years. So people are born into this sprawling poverty year on year. It's only getting worse. And far from, the ideology of all boats in the harbour rising as there is more a growth of GDP, far from all boats in the harbour rising, some boats, of course, are sinking into the trash. We can't deny that now. The data, any kind of data supports that. If I may extend the metaphor, some harbours have their ecosystems trashed. Their ecosystems trashed the same time as we know a few have walked away with a profit. We're seeing depletion of the world. We used to say a few years ago it was the area the size of Wales, wasn't it, that we were losing in rainforests every year. This year, what is it? Something like 18 million acres a year that we're losing in rainforests. Where is this land coming from? Yeah. So it's only getting worse, and it's not regenerating itself. Oil consumption, fuel and CO2. We know that what is it now? 83.6 billion barrels a day going up. Million barrels a day going up in smoke. Again, a figure that's only getting worse. As much as we're coming up with solar and wind and all these things, the burning of fossil fuels is only getting worse. Every inch of our space in the developed world is more and more maximised for production to feed the cities that are built on topsoil, on some of the most fertile topsoil in the land, and where wealth comes into. An agribusiness that's turned over year on year more towards fewer and fewer growers. An agribusiness that's not making us any healthier. The nutritional value that comes out of that agribusiness as a proportion is decreasing. And we're seeing all our systems trashed. We're seeing them contaminated. The food supply, the topsoil, the air pollution, the oceans, the depletion of water levels, and contamination of the water levels. And we're living in one of the times of one of the worst species extinction. What are people saying? Some scientists are saying that it's something like 24 species per day we're losing. And others are saying 150 for species per day. There's some argument there, but there's not arguing that we're living in one of a calamitous time of species extinction. And we haven't been hit by a meteorite, or we're not going through an ice age. It's just the impact that we're having on the planet. And if this, we should be traumatized by this. I mean, there's not a single nature program that comes on television that doesn't make us aware of this problem. But what can we do about this? Of course, we carry on. We try and do what we can so we're not on the bottom of this pile. So we sort of live in hope. Well, let's hope something will come along, something will be invented, someone will come up with some ideas, or something will change. Let's hope that we struggle through our lives. And it was Henry Woolwich, clever guy, who came up with this notion. Growth is a substitute for the equality of income. So long as there is growth, there is hope. And that makes large income differentials tolerable. Well, this wasn't a statement made in protest. This was a statement made by Henry Woolwich of the US Federal Reserve as a means of deliberate design. And this is, I think, the cycle, the degrading cycle that we're living in. We've got a type of governance, a specific design of governance that is swayed by the vested interests of those with wealth, capitalism. And we've got a certain type of capitalism. If you notice, any business sector is dominated by a handful of global players. It's a certain type of capitalism. It's not the only one there is. We have a money system that is built on this constant growth. It's like how can we respect this money system that's like a junkie that needs feeding? If it goes a couple of days cold turkey, it will collapse in on itself. And the taxpayer will have to bail it out. And of course, our lifestyles fit into this project. We are part of this project whether we like it or not. We can make little incremental changes. We can ride a bicycle. We can put some solar panels up, grow our own vegetables. We can make these little changes. But ultimately, we're paying into this system. As taxpayers and as voters, we're allowing this to continue. And, we survive. We need this delicate little thin blue line for the survival of our species. There's nothing more important to us right now. And of course, I'm going to throw this cliche in. You cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them. So what is the juxtaposition? What is the antidote of what we're doing? And so this is essentially all that I've written about. And it starts with that place that I brought up at the beginning, what the people want. And it starts from that notion. And then that's where I've had my head for the last 5 or 6 years to think, well, okay, let's just make a little sort of study of that. What is it the people want for their society? Can that be detailed and named? And it can be. And you can back test these ideas, 12 ideas I'm going to run through, of what people want for their society. You can back test this against any column space within newspapers, any vox populi, any voice of the people that you hear. You can backtest this on. People want societal care. So they want to know that, if anything happens to them, well, society in its entirety will sort of take care of them. They also want to know that if they see someone struggling, we like to think that, there should be something in place that looks after that person when they need it. And of course, this and like all the stuff I'm going to mention, we want this on a budget. We don't want people taking the pee out of it, you know? We want it for a budget, for what we put in taxation, for what the result is. Societal care. We want democracy. We want things like, you know, a reliable source of information that's not spun or corrupted. We want transparency and openness and honesty. People want a better education system. People want a better health system. And they want these things for all. They want them things distributed so that we see, because we're hardwired for empathy, whether we like it or not, and whether, you know, certain ideas pull us away from this idea. We're hardwired for empathy. We've had a few thousand years in civilizations. We've had nearly 200,000 years as tribal Homo sapien. We've had millennia as pack mammals. We are hardwired for empathy. Any study of neuroscience or anything, I'm going off on a tangent, but any study of neuroscience will see, was it Rizzolato realized that we had this mirror neurons, you know, the University of Power experiments and things like that. So whether we like it or not, we're hardwired for empathy. We want these things for ourselves in society. People want to live, you know, to have their lifestyles, the way they live in communities, with a healthy food supply, and they want to know that what they're doing, their impact on the planet for living and having electricity and all these things, they want to know that their impact is not destroying the planet, essentially. So they want people are more conscious about their impact on the environment. People want reliable infrastructure. They know these practical things, communication, transport. You know, they want these water systems, energy systems in place. It's not much to ask for, I don't think. People want, of course, worker rights, a fairer system of capitalism, a fairer tax system, and things like a closening of wage differentials, those kind of things. People want, of course, an ethical basis for foreign policy, both in terms of conflict and in terms of equality of fairness in trade. People want effective and fair policing. People want the same of a justice system, a penal system. People want greater prosperity, a bit more money at the end of the week in their pocket. Not too much for us, to us again. People want to have that translated into the enjoyment of leisure time, the work-life balance. And finally, people want to preserve heritage, culture, and, you know, the ideas of a just society. So I suggest that these 12 elements here can be definable. As soon as you have a value system where you can imagine what would be the worst place, what would be a worse situation, what would be a better situation, as soon as you have a value system in place, then you can say, well, what brings us closer to that value system? And sometimes I use the word utopia, perhaps I shouldn't. But, you know, something that takes us to a better place. As soon as you have that in place, then you can start saying, well, how do we measure that, the progress towards that place? And you can define what makes that increase, that better place, what maximizes well-being to people in society. So I suggest that these are, you know, definable, measurable societal outcomes. And essentially that's the I call them human welfare indices. People talk about human welfare indices at the moment with, they talk about education and health and a few other elements, but I refer to these as human welfare indices, and they're all something that can be broken down into more incremental measurements. And of course, it can then we can start to think, build upon this and start to think, well, you know, the only reason for governance is to bring about these societal aims, surely. So then, well, how do we do that efficiently? It becomes a basis for how governance gets organised or better organised. And it comes down to this simple equation. And you might say, well, surely that's just oversimplifying it. Well, I'll show you how that can build up in complexity to answer some of our global problems. And you might say that is perhaps quite complex already, you know, to bring everything down to this complex kind of set of equations. Well, what's the equation that we're chasing at the moment? You know, you ask any taxi driver or plumber, he'll be telling you, yeah, what we need is a growth of GDP. the equation that goes something like C plus G plus I plus balance of trade. That's the equation that we're all invested in at the moment, that we're all chasing. So surely this is a better value system, you know, for us to be chasing as a society. And I think it puts us in the mind frame. As we started with those few questions at the beginning, it puts us in the mind frame that we are part of an agreed collective, that we are taxpayers and voters of this particular system that we've got in place at the moment. And we're all, you know, invested in the outcome. And that should be the rallying point. That should be, you know, what we feel positive for. There's some thinking about this. I'm not going to go into this today. There's a sort of deeper set of thoughts about this, about who we are as an ego, what we tend to do, what we look for is sort of self-actualization, ambition, things like that. But we're never decoupled with who we are as our social self. So there's a whole set of thinking that I'm not going to touch on at the moment. It's in the book. But we expand our empathy from ourselves to our family, to our community, to society, to the ecosystem, to the physical world. And there's certain virtues that make us more successful in society, I would suggest. And as societies have progressed, we've gone towards areas where we can collectivize on some of these. Self-determination becomes collective determination. And we're, again, hardwired to do that. And so I look at the world from this viewpoint, and it underpins the result I've come up with. So I'm just going to sort of say that there is some deeper thinking to that from a philosophical kind of position. But it's nothing that people haven't talked about before, from Confucius to, you know, Marcus Aurelius to John Donne. You know, no man is an island. Adam Smith talks about the man within the chest. You know, this who we are as an ego, someone that's out for self-gain, and who we are as a member of society. We are two sides of the same coin. We are both of these people, and we should be encouraged with the political landscape as we are to decouple and think, well, no, I want more things for myself, and I feel more capable of getting those things. Therefore, I'll go to the right. And someone who's thinking, well, no, you know, I prefer to think of ourselves as more social creatures. I'm going more to the left. We shouldn't be divided in this way. Because we do it, don't we? We do it in rooms like this. We rush to the point, as intellectuals, of where we disagree with each other. We'll do it in rooms like this. We'll say to each other, you know, they're the agnostics and they're the atheists. And when we call ourselves humanists and they call themselves secularists, we'll do it. We'll divide ourselves and we rush past that weight of substance on which we do agree. And that's where we find our power, I think. And I give it this name, political humanism. I suggest this is the ideology of the 21st century. And why do I call it political humanism? Well, because it starts with the notion of human agency. It's only us that's caused the problem. It's only us that's going to fix it. I'm not waiting for a judgment day. I'm not waiting for some sort of mystical balancing of the universe. You know, it's only cause and effect of what we've done to the planet and coming up with the ideas that's going to put it right. It's political humanism because it's, you know, our moral positions go to the, you know, are created. I think I don't have to convince an audience like this of humanists and atheists that morality develops over the course of human history, from the human experience. We can figure out what maximizes well-being to society, what moral positions do that. And some of them, whether we like to admit it or not, have come from our religious history. You know, compassion, kindness to strangers, charity, great humanistic positions, I would suggest. And equally, we can say from the human experience, we've come up with some terrible ideas. There were people like Herbert Spencer that came up with the notion of social Darwinism. Nietzsche that came up with the idea of man and Superman. That, you know, ideas that just led to awful outcomes, you know, historically with imperialism, colonialism, slavery, and of course with fascism, with racism. Terrible ideas that we can look back on and say, you know what, let's not have that. Let's not have those bad ideas, because this is what it leads to, some bad results. So morality, I think, moves on as society as we have the awareness to what's going on with the individual around us. The it requires human rationale, it requires a scientific method, it requires evidence, awareness, debate, all these things that we've achieved through the scientific method. It has a doctrine, humanism, of human rights, which was a major step forward in our history, where we've gone from this thing of thinking, well, what is a successful society? Is it one that can dominate other society, other nations around it? Or is it one that looks after its individuals? And the notion of human rights is about that. It's like, what is the effect on the individual? What are they going through? Are they suffering? Is there oppression? Is there, having their liberty taken away? All these elements of human rights. And it's a change of mindset. And the implication is, of course, that society is there to make sure people's human rights are protected. So it's political humanism because of humane behaviour, we move away from our barbaric history towards a more civilised history. So for these reasons, I give it this title of political humanism. And I suggest that humanism, is not something that should be thought of as a decreasing circle. Humanism, to me, is this. So there are some aspects, as I mentioned, within religion, some notions that are humanistic principles. Because as an atheist, I don't think they were put there by a deity. I think that when we can agree, these are good notions, compassion, all these things. There's some things, of course, that fall outside that line. If people are treating women unequally or are prejudiced against LGBT or anything else, that's clearly outside of this line. So humanism becomes this sort of larger moral framework, if you like. This, and what it does is that it says to people within religions, it says, look, we have all this in common. We're not fractionalizing who you are and who we are. We're saying, look, these are these agreeable positions. And that's how we should term humanism, I think. And then, okay, so where would this idea fall on a political sort of landscape? Will it be some sort of little dot around the middle? And again, I suggest no. This is, sometimes we do things for ourselves, sometimes we do things for society. It takes up the biggest space, the bigger conversation. Sometimes some things are outside that space. The conservative notion of deregulated capitalism, austerity for the poor, tax breaks for the rich, is definitely outside that space. And it's the same as any other notion like BNP and things like that. It definitely falls outside that spectrum and that conversation. So all these ideas, they're not just ideological ideas. I have detailed them within the UK Humanist Party. It's a very grassroots kind of movement. But it's a way of taking big ideas and knuckling them down into detailed policy. So I think it's a good vehicle for that. But it's something that I'm trying to encourage to be more like an alliance between people coming from different viewpoints, perhaps politically from Labour, Green, Lib Dem, that should be part of the same movement, to stand as a juxtaposition against what is prevailing as this project of deregulated capitalism. So that's the essence of the book, to start thinking as this agreed collective, trying to make this the rallying point for change. And it's something we've moved towards historically. There's incremental change since Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights. These were notions that we've absorbed, and we've gone through this process and somehow arrived at where are we going now? Surely this is the next evolutionary step in our political thinking, is to arrive at this: what are societal values? How should society be designed for the people in it, not just for the 1%? So this is one of the ebooks, Understanding the Nation State as the Agreed Collective, I've got going on. So how do we make that transition? So on a practical level, myself and some few technically minded people, programmers, UX designers, nerds basically, myself included, have got together and designed something inspired by the words of Buckminster Fuller, that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Now, you may have seen this before. You know, it's an easy thing to throw up there. But this is essentially what we've done in very practical terms. We've designed something called MagnaSocia. For the Latin speakers among you, you may recognize that as being something like, it's Great Society, perhaps suggesting something like Big Society. But let me tell you, this is the opposite to the notion of Big Society that I think Cameron came up with. So it's a platform for direct democracy. It's something we're still working on. You think of it as a Facebook for political engagement. And what it does is fit around our existing method of doing politics, the existing system, but the intention is that it becomes the bigger model that makes the current model smaller and less significant and eventually obsolete. So what we want to bring to the political landscape is are sort of three notions, and they represent three areas of the program, of the platform. One is to rationalize the system so that we're not, pushing each other into different camps. Ideas come together and are rationalized. There's a process where you consider everyone's point of view. It doesn't mean you compromise, but it just means that things are taken into account. To intellectualize the process, so there is more evidence-based policy as opposed to policy-based, policy-based evidence. And then obviously to democratize the process. So it's an app where anyone can sign on. Any UK registered voter can sign up to, give their consensus on ideas, not get into camps or groups, and not to have some people representing other people. It's direct democracy. So everyone has their say, has their consensus on ideas. There's also the other element of it where we're trying to build committees of subject specialists. I mean, this is a big project in itself, to create a sort of a think tank of ideas, of subject specialists. Again, that's designed into the 12 tables that I'm suggesting each has 12 societal ambitions that it's leading towards. And each one has subcommittees and things like this. So it's really reflecting the infrastructure that's already in place in our current system. So we rationalize it we send out these sort of vehicles. One of them, let me give it one example, is a thing called Bill Watch that examines the bills currently before Parliament. The bills that, these bills, they're stacks of A4 paper printed out. They're huge documents. Lots of small print. MPs can't possibly go through all that when it comes to voting. So we have this Bill Watch that sort of examines, subject specialists to come in and kind of look at the small print, look at the consequences that will happen as a result, and expose what's going through Parliament. And then, of course, that puts it out to to people and sort of says, well, is this something that I agree with or disagree with? And so you might create a situation, for example, where one particular constituency, because you're voting and talking on everything, but it will examine the results per constituency. A constituency might say, well, 80% of us reject this bill. So the MP then does what? His chief whip comes round and says, no, we want you to vote this bill through. What does he do? It just puts this pressure point on the MPs to say, you should vote accordingly to, you should represent your constituency. Isn't that what we're told that you do for a living? So, and if not, then when it comes to voting in the by-election, that should put, again, pressure on them. So it's designed around what we've got. There's so many other vehicles. There's sort of campaigns and other kinds of vehicles that go around. The Bill Watch in particular, carries on going after that point and becomes something that people contribute to. Okay, what would be a better bill? Of course, you have the intellectualization of the process where people are giving ideas, knowing their subject, and putting ideas out there, and people are voting, how many people think this is a good idea? Yeah, if it's a sort of 50-50, then you have to find some sort of way of taking everybody's fears and things into account and building an idea that is a solution. So it's a sort of a conflict, solution kind of process. So we have a sort of a little charter, things like that there is no higher authority than the will of the people, and all these kind of things to make it truly a democratic system. So I suggest this is sort of one of the ways that we expand on some of these couple of ideas here that we've been toying with for a couple of thousand years, and I don't think I've got right yet, the idea of democracy, but also the idea of res publicas, that what is the thing of the people. And I suggest that it is something that comes down to these agreeable positions, these 12 human welfare indices. And that is a constitutional basis. So I've done a fair amount of work on what a British constitution would look like, and it's all these ideas filtered into that. So, it starts with this idea that it's a democratic nation state of its agreed collective. There should be no higher authority than the will of the people, and that governance is there purely as a construct for achieving societal aims, as a preamble. And then, of course, having ourselves a social contract. What are the duties and responsibilities of governance? Well, they are to the 12 societal aims. Equally, what is the role of citizenship? And don't forget, every other country, which is most other countries of the world, have a constitution. They teach the constitution in schools. So there is a sense of, well, what is my part in this system? How do I behave? How should I behave as a citizen to keep this all together? Be the change that you would like to see. And of course, going back to that point that, where we are, people are coming from all over the world, and we're accepting people from all over the world, then there should be some sort of just agreement in place that, well, these are the values here. Because at the moment, when people apply to become a citizen here, they have to go through this daft little exam where they learn a little bit about King Henry VIII and a little bit about EastEnders, I mean, how do you make up, they must be thinking kind of how do you equate some sort of moral kind of foundation of this thing from these daft little clips of cultural history? So I think we should have a constitution. Again, we should, especially at this time, we should be protecting human rights. So I talk a lot about that. I say that because who could argue with human rights? But the weird thing is people do. People are sort of saying, no, I don't like this project. You just have to think, well, what? And rather than, again, pushing them away in a different camp, you have to consider what is the fear of human rights? Well, people see it as a weakness because some of the worst people in the world are taking advantage of that thing as a sort of weakness. A lot of it goes to court. It doesn't get very far, but people are sort of saying, yeah, I know I tried to blow up the train station, but I'm missing out on my family life or something like that. People keep making these daft little applications to the Court of Human Rights, and that's really putting it off. So I suggest a sort of what I call this ethical framework. I think some ideas, some moral positions have heavier weight than others, and of course it starts with the sanctity of human life. There's nothing more important, followed by a life of well-being, freedom from oppression and all these things, followed by ideas of personal development. They should all be there. But there is a priority of how they're assessed. If someone's making conflict between two positions within human rights, if you get what I mean. One element that's missed out in human rights sometimes is, of course, the rights of future generations not to be born on a planet that's trashed. So, learning to live symbiotically, to have our net impact on the planet individually looked at so that we are not destroying the planet before our great-grandchildren are here. And then, of course, I talk about what you'd have to have in place to bring accountability to governance. So I suggest if there is a legislative body that's more like a direct democracy, there is a judiciary to safeguard the constitution. Then when we give, through legislation, powers to our executive to carry out legislation, we shouldn't have this secondary tier. I know it's been useful in the past. We shouldn't have this secondary political process that drags it back. And I know it's been important to have. So you have a politicisation of local councils. I can see the value that it's brought in the current system. But if anyone deals with strategy or organisational behaviour, they can see at a glance that this is not, you're not optimising, you're not maximising what you get for your tax taxation in terms of, public services and societal outcome. So I suggest there that you allow your executive to do what they do best, get on with the job and get it done, to carry out legislation as it's agreed from the legislative, the will of the people. But then you have to regulate that in real time. So I'm going to come back to that point. No, I won't. I'll say it now. It's most noticeable in something like policing, where you need accountability from a separate body of regulators that is safeguarding the constitutional rights of the people. So it runs in real time with the executive authority carrying out its what it aims to do to make a safer society for us all. So the regulator therefore would safeguard data protection or safeguard CCTV monitoring, those kind of things, watching cameras in cells and, safeguarding the individual. Run in real time, it would be a more efficient system. So it's just a sort of byproduct of the thinking. So that's how we make our transition. And I suggest that we have a transition, a restructuring and a redesign of most of these sort of areas of our society. And I think this framework, this ideological centre, provides the foundation stone for it. And so when it comes to this, what I call it, the degrading cycle, that we have something that a system of governance in place that replaces that and repairs that problem. We have, we redesign our money system so that it's not the debt-based, ever-growing money system that we have at the moment. And I suggest that that's made that the taxpayer should own its own currency. That may not mean much to anyone. Has anyone heard of an organisation called positivemoney.org? Yes. Hands up. Positive. Anyone else that hasn't? Positivemoney.org is essential to understand how our money system works. You can do a degree in economics and still not really appreciate how money works, how money comes into the system. It comes in, 97% of the money that comes into the system comes in through credit as debt. It becomes real money. I think, so the foundation of society being there to provide what society needs then suggests that the money system does the same. And it's essentially... Oh, okay, yeah, okay, right. So there's these ideas. That capitalism will change as a result, that there'll be a more distributed system of capitalism if we decouple this arrangement between I call it pop capitalism. I'll show you what that looks like. And the vision, the outcome of it is that how we can then change our lives to learn to live symbiotically with our place within the environment. And that creates a whole new sort of set of thinking and rules for regreening our society and making our net impact as close to neutral as possible, or even better, close to abundance. So there's a sort of a visionary idea of what will reconnect us to our ecosystem. So essentially, there are 12 ideas relating to these 12 human welfare indices that I've spoken about. I've got little email thing, little ebooks on each of these subjects. Something I'm working towards. So yeah, something got something to say. I think it underpins how we can change our justice system, education system, health system, and taxation, system of taxation, which I talk about in more assigning the different taxations to the societal outcome. And then it all comes down to this of how we then influence the world, to say that these HWI times 12, the set of human welfare indices becomes the yardstick for other nations to bring their government to accountability, just on a sort of set of principles. And then, so what I've done here is defined political humanism. I've shown its sort of emergence in human history, in the book more than I have here. I've detailed the outcome in thinking, in writing, in this book that I'm happy to give out as an ebook. Detailed the outcome of the policy into policy for the Humanist Party, and I've formed some of the political constructs that we could have in place as of MagnaSocia. When that gets launched, we still need to have a budget and a lot of development going on. So what I'm asking of you is just simply to critique these ideas, help guide my thinking. If you are a subject specialist in any particular area, then let's have a conversation and see where we agree and disagree and those kind of things, seeing if you can add to the thinking on this. And if you are positive about it, then join in as a movement, let's rally. But of course it starts up with a conversation, so let's have that conversation, let's rally, and let's make the world a better place. Thank you very much.
Very impressed.
Thank you.
So there's a short break now, so I'm sure further need to go for a couple of breaks. But just to remind everybody, we're a membership organisation, and if you wish to join, somebody leave some notes here or contact the office at any time. Are there any other announcements? Yes.
I don't know whether you should, whether there's a meeting here this afternoon.
There is a meeting in the afternoon at 2:30. For people who want to continue this talk, there's a small group of people that tend to meet regularly. You're welcome to join. Is there any other points?